America in general, we sort of lost our fascination with both the revolution and the frontier. Sort of culturally, we're not as interested. There's been a real move to sort of demonize the people who are the settlers, and of course, just even the founding fathers, people who were involved in the revolution to begin with. There's also, I think, this idea that Boone is a sort of a semi-literate person, which wasn't true at all. He loved to read, and his favorite book was Gulliver's Travels. It turned out to be serendipitous because I started writing the novel when I was 47, which is the age Daniel Boone is in the book.
Welcome back to Better for America, where we bring you the stories and voices that shape our understanding of history and the world around us. Today, we're going to dive into a fascinating and often overlooked chapter of the American Revolution, the fight for the Kentucky frontier. Joining us is historian and author Jeff Winstead. His book, The Last Battle of the Revolution, Daniel Boone and the War for American Independence on the Kentucky frontier. This incredible book sheds light on the critical role that this rugged territory played in securing America's future. I found this just amazing, the meticulous research and the vivid storytelling Jeff really brings to life, the battles, the hardships, the heroism of the pioneers like Daniel Boone, revealing a side of the revolution that many may not have heard before. So Jeff, welcome to Better for America. I'm thrilled to have you here with me today.
Hi, Rebecca. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm so appreciative of you and AMAC for featuring the book as you're on your Book of the Month Club. And just for the exposure an organization this size gives to a book to an independent author it's had a huge impact. So thank you.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here, and you're absolutely right. Your book is the AMAC Book Club's pick of the month, and our readers have been captivated by really its portrayal of the Revolutionary War. I want to encourage everyone to pick up this book. Tell us what inspired you to tell us this story, and why do you think Americans really need to read this book, get their hands on this great book, which revisits a moment in history?
Well, the short answer is my own ignorance inspired it. What happened was my wife and I, in 2005, we had just moved to North Carolina, and she had picked up a local paper, and there was a travel article about Blue Licks, Kentucky, which is a national park in Kentucky where this battle, that's the landmark for where this battle took place. And she's like, oh, this sounds really interesting. I see that Daniel Boone and his son were involved in the battle, and what do you know about it? Because I'm a Kentuckian. Yeah. And I had to admit, I didn't know anything about it and nothing about the battle. And frankly, I barely even knew who Daniel Boone was. And, perhaps, that was a failure of mine not paying attention in class that day, or maybe it was a failure of the education system, but regardless. So I was a little embarrassed by that. And so I started researching the battle, and within a couple of moments, it was pretty obvious. It's a really interesting story here. I couldn't believe that I wasn't familiar with it, and just Americans in general may not be. So I checked out my first couple of Boone biographies from the library. One was a biography on tape that I would listen to coming and going from work. I listened to it multiple times and just really became fascinated by Boone and by this particular story of the Revolutionary War, which takes place in 1782. So it's actually a little less than a year after Cornwallis had surrendered to George Washington. So the war on the East Coast is essentially over for all intents and purposes. Now we're still a year away from the Treaty of Paris that officially ended the war. And so during that time, the British and using their sort of Native American allies are having these little incursions into the frontier, which is Kentucky at the time. It's essentially the original Wild West. And sort of causing as much havoc as they can for the people, the settlers who live there, who have already been fleeing the territory from droughts and hardship and Native American attacks. And it's pretty rough going. And so I became fascinated with that. And I was originally going to do this story as a comic book because I had never written a novel before. And so I spent about 15 years doing the research on and off. And eventually my wife had been sort of nudging me to, hey, maybe you should write a novel. And so finally I decided, okay, maybe you're right. Let's try it. Let's give it a go. And it turned out to be serendipitous because I started writing the novel when I was 47, which is the age Daniel Boone is in the book.
Wow.
So I felt like it was just sort of meant to be. And as I was writing the book, without planning it, I got to the scene where the battle takes place on the anniversary of the battle.
Wow.
So I just felt like things were really
That's a sign.
aligning, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
it was a
that
sign. So I felt like it was divine intervention. So
it's really terrific. So many Americans believe the Revolutionary War ended at Yorktown. So you tell the story of the Battle of Blue Licks. Why do you believe that that has been largely forgotten?
yeah, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. So the Blue Licks, the state park, they advertise it as is the location of the last battle of the Revolution. There's some quibbling about that, depending on the size of
Sure.
the people, the number of people involved and whatnot. But so I'm really not sure. I think part of it is America in general. We sort of lost our fascination with both the Revolution and the frontier.
Mm.
So there was the Fess Parker Daniel Boone series in the '60s that went into the, I guess, the early '70s. But once that ended, I think American pop culture just may have shifted to the Old West, and something about the Old West is a little more tangible. Like when you see Wyatt Earp in costume and Tombstone, you can relate to that clothing a little bit more. The clothing of the frontier is a little more strange. You just get glimpses of that in the last Mohicans movie.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of it. It's just a little alien. I also think just sort of culturally, we're not as interested. There's been a real move to sort of demonize the people who are the settlers, and of course, just even the founding fathers, people who were involved in the Revolution to begin with. As I was writing the book, we were sort of going through that, tearing down statues phase of the country.
Yes.
And so I was sort of keenly aware of the sort of cultural shift that was happening at the time. So I felt like in some small part, this was a way for me to sort of tell this story to bring these characters back to the characters in my book, but the real people back to the forefront, sort of breathe life into them in a way that would make them relatable to a modern audience.
I think it's just terrific because I think, one of the major themes in your book is the price of freedom, that there were real sacrifices made by real people. And today in America, we see a battle over, as you're pointing out, history itself. So hopefully and prayerfully, we'll learn some lessons that were perhaps lost, forgotten, or maybe even intentionally distorted, which is what we're seeing more and more of today. But we just love what you're doing with this book. I just want to talk for a minute on Daniel Boone because he is a legendary American figure, and many people only do know him as a frontiersman, not as someone who was deeply involved in the Revolution. What do most people get wrong about Boone, in your view?
Well, the most obvious thing is he never wore a coonskin cap. So that's sort of, as I mentioned Fess Parker earlier, that was sort of a holdover from. And this is why I think culturally, even though I never saw that show even in reruns, but culturally I had this sort of confusion between Boone and Davy Crockett. And it's because Fess Parker played both characters on two different shows and dressed exactly the same essentially for both shows. So the headgear, which is the most minor thing, but it's the most obvious thing that people get wrong. He actually would wear like a beef or felt hat with a wide brim. It's a Quaker style cap. And of course, the reason that is you're in the wilderness, it rains a lot. And it's waterproof, and it's sort of the brim allows the water to run off, without getting in your eyes. So there's that. There's also, I think, this idea that Boone is a sort of a semi-literate person, which wasn't true at all. He was he loved to read, and his favorite book was Gulliver's Travels, which he read back and forth. He would bring it with him on. He would go on long hunts, they would call them, and sometimes it would be with a group, sometimes it would be alone. And he might be 3 months in the wilderness at a hunting camp alone with just this book, or with other guys reading to them from the book as a form of entertainment. So, and also he was pretty well written during the research of the book. He did have to write to the governor of Virginia about the results of the battle, and his writing. It's amazing. All of these guys, frankly, their grip on language is much closer to Shakespearean, you might say. So they actually are very well written. None of them could spell a lick. They all spelled phonetically, which was pretty common at the time as well. but just incredibly very intelligent people, as you would imagine you'd have to be to sort of come to the frontier, literally carve the road into the frontier, and then once you get there and bring other people there, you have to sort of build an entire society, forts, blacksmithing, make your own gunpowder, like all this stuff has to be done because you cannot bring in supplies.
Yeah.
So.
I just find it so fascinating history. And whenever I'm driving, going over old bridges or in parts of the country where we know that there was a battle, I can't help but go back. I think about what was life like then? Just the basic survival. How did people survive, stay warm? What did you eat day to day? How did you get your water? And then when you mix in there what was really happening, the building and the shaping of a nation, it's fascinating, and this book does such an incredible job telling a beautiful story. You've got a lot of references to real history. I want to ask you, though, given the political and cultural divides that we see in America today, do you think Americans have really lost sight of the kind of unity that is necessary to secure our nation's independence? Because I do think that many were united. We feel very divided today. What lessons do we need to remember?
That's actually a great question, because the thing that you take away from the book is, or my research of the book was, all these people are very individualistic. So they're obviously, they've come to the frontier, they're seeking their own fortunes. And for the most part, the last thing they want is to be forted up together in a fort. They want to be out miles away from each other on their own land, growing crops, building cabins, and all that. But as a community, they have to come together, or some of this stuff doesn't get done. And at times it was difficult. They started building the fort at Boonesboro, and they had a hard time initially getting people to come off their farms to contribute to the fort building, but they eventually had to. So yeah, it's the community. It takes a combination of sort of talented individuals to come together as a community to make all this stuff work in sync, and so they actually becomes a family. So the Boone family features very largely in the book, obviously, but there are people who he's not actually related to who are just as much family because of this close community ties. Even Boone himself, the sort of interesting thing about Boone is, as I mentioned, he would go into the woods and hunt for 3 months at a time, but he was also very charismatic, loved people, loved being around people. So he's sort of this weird, if you consider like a spectrum of an introvert and an extrovert, he was somewhere exactly in the middle, which is the most fascinating thing I discovered about Boone, because I couldn't really wrap my mind around how does one person do that, but he did it.
It's like he really embraced rugged individualism, understanding that, and that's what we need to get back to a bit here in America, I think, is that, a merit-based society that rewards people for good work, that recognizes individual talent, and lifts people up one by one, because in doing that, when you feel empowered to be the best that you can be, and the greatest, achieve the greatest that you set out to achieve, then naturally you want to help other people. You want other people to have the same opportunity. And I do believe that we are a land of incredible, incredible opportunities. So I just want to thank you so much for being here with me today. This has been a wonderful opportunity for us to really highlight AMAC's Book of the Month. AMAC members are so passionate about preserving history. So, Jeff, I just think this has been a fantastic conversation. We would love to invite you back as we invite AMAC members in the coming weeks to talk about this book. So we'll have to see if we can't get on your schedule so that you can engage directly with AMAC members. But thank you for this fantastic conversation.
Oh, sure, absolutely. And if anyone has any questions about the book as they're going, I know there's a discussion on the AMAC website. So if you just want to post there and ask me something directly, I'd be happy to answer.
We love that. Okay, so for everybody out there listening, many of you have not heard of the AMAC Book Club, so go ahead and check it out on amac.us. You'll see it there on our homepage, listed under AMAC member benefits as well. The URL is right here. Check out this book, The Last Battle of the Revolution. It really riveting book. It offers such a fresh and gripping perspective on the fight for the Kentucky frontier, and I know all of you out there are going to love it. So for those who want to learn more, be sure to check out Jeff's book, follow his work, and as always, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with a fellow history enthusiast. Jeff, thanks again for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you with me.
Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate it.
Excellent. To all of you out there, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you back again with us soon next time. Have a great day, everyone.
The Association of Mature American Citizens is the conservative voice for Americans 50 and older. AMAC is fighting for the values that you hold dear. Join today. Together, we can write the course of America.